Hello, and welcome to World Water Week, the second international high level dialogue on the global framework on water scarcity in agriculture, or WASAG, was convened in Rome in October 2024. Today, we'll dig into some of the key outcomes from this landmark conference and look forward to the new governance mechanism of WASAG. To do this and to discuss even more, I'm joined on today's panel by Ms. Maaike van Ginneke, Water Envoy of the Netherlands and the Deputy Chair of the Steering Committee of the Global Framework on Water Scarcity in Agriculture, WASAG. And also Mr. Ruhiza Jambaroto, Senior Land and Water Officer and Team Leader of WASAG, a partnership hosted by the Food and Agriculture Organization of the United Nations. Thank you both so much for being here. Micah, I'd like to start with you. Food security is a threat that is facing millions around the world and is looming larger under a changing climate. Tell us why we're not hearing enough about water scarcity and water security in agriculture when we talk about food security, and what do we need to change to bring more attention to the issue?
Yeah. Water scarcity in agriculture is a really big problem. Because we need to feed the world and we need water to feed the world. And a lot of our food is produced in areas where there's not sufficient water or sufficient clean water. So we need to hear more about this. I agree with you. And it depends a little bit where you go, because I think in order to really address this problem, water scarcity in agriculture, we need to bring together the water community and the agricultural community. Farmers are the best local water managers, and we don't always realize that when we talk to water people. And I think you can think about blue water, the water in rivers and lakes, and green water, which is the water in the topsoil. Farmers are specialists in green water, in that very important water part. And as water engineers, I'm a water engineer myself, we only think about the water we see in surface, in lakes, in wetlands, in rivers. So we can learn a lot together. And if we bring those communities together, we can solve problems and also make sure that this important problem to feed the world actually gets the attention it deserves. And that's why WASAG is so important.
I think it's really important. I think I agree with you. I don't feel like we hear enough about farmers who are really, as you say, green water stewards. They know best how to manage this vital resource, and we need to harness that knowledge more. Thank you so much for that. Jacques, can you briefly introduce WASAG, its mission and evolution, and walk us through some of those key outcomes from the high-level dialogue that was held in Rome, including how this is shaping your revised strategy?
Thank you, Kanika. WASAG vision, it's a world whose food systems are secure and resilient in a changing climate in the context of water scarcity. So WASAG was launched at UNFCCC COP22 in Marrakesh, Morocco in 2016. It was followed a few months later by a meeting of partners that was convened by FAO in Rome, and these partners agreed to the need to establish WASAG as a partnership. And they established a steering committee made of 5 groups of members. The first group is government and intergovernmental organizations. The second group is UN agencies. The third group is academia and research institutions. The fourth group is NGOs and civil society organizations. And the last group is private sector organizations and professional organizations. And they agreed to establish a steering committee made by these 5 groups and working groups as a delivery mechanism on different topics. The first public meeting of WASAG beyond the April 2017 meeting was actually here in Stockholm in August 2017. And there the steering committee also met for the first time, and they agreed on a number of working groups: financing mechanism, drought preparedness, sustainable agriculture water use, which were followed by other working groups on drought preparedness, on water and nutrition, and lately on silent agriculture.
Oh, wow.
So WASAG participated in the World Water Forum in Brasilia in 2018, and there Capo Verde came to WASAG and said, we need you because you're facing a serious problem of water scarcity in our country with the persistent droughts. They already have less than 200 millimeters of rainfall per year. So we told Capo Verde that our mission is global. Then they said, then we convene you in our country so that we can see. You can see what is happening here, and then the rest of the world can come and work together. So then the first WASAG Forum took place in Capo Verde during the World Week in March 2019. It was a success because it was those partners from the different working groups that made the core of the forum for 3 days discussing, sharing experiences, going in the field. And it led to a second forum after the pandemic, again in Capo Verde in February 2023. And then the momentum was so strong that countries decided that this is no longer a business of partners, it has to be our own business. And thus, the Rome Water Dialogue that took place last year in October was prepared and conceived and took place. The outcome of that Rome Water Dialogue was first the establishment of a member-led steering committee. And Mike is the vice chair representing the Netherlands. We have Switzerland, we have got Egypt, we've got Zimbabwe, and many other countries representing different parts of the world. We adopted a Rome Water Declaration on water scarcity in agriculture. As part of the governance, so we prefer operating mechanism of WASAG. So we had the steering committee that was established. The existing, the old steering committee is now being muted into a technical advisory committee with exactly the same functions as before, while the steering committee now takes more policy and guidance and resource mobilization role. And then we agreed now we'll formalize the forum of WASAG every second year, rotating between regions, and the next one will be in Punta Cana, Dominican Republic next year in May, and then a plenary assembly every second year in Rome. And finally, we are busy developing a strategy that will be responsive to the needs on the ground because the expectations from the countries are very, very high. Thank you.
I can hear that. I mean, this is clearly very member-driven, need-driven. It's come through many iterations. We've had a long history here. So I'm really looking forward to seeing how this will continue to take shape. Micah, let's come back to you. The Rome Water, excuse me. The Rome Water Dialogue also marked the launch of a new governance approach for WASAG. So, what's the significance of having a country led steering committee and a technical advisory committee, as Jean has just laid out? And how will these bodies help drive impact?
Yeah. I think what we really need to start with is that WASAG is a partnership. And it's a partnership because so much is happening in different countries in terms of science, in terms of policies, in terms of action. And a lot is happening in the water space, and a lot of is happening in the agricultural space. So our governance structure needed to be bringing together policy, science, and action, and bringing together people who know about water and people who know about agriculture. And I think that's what we did with this governance structure. So the policy is really, because we have a country-led steering committee, what WASAG, the harvest of what WASAG does, the best practices, the guidelines, etc. Our audience very often is governments, and they're in the steering committee. So I bring what WASAG does back with me to the Netherlands, and so do my colleagues from Egypt and from other countries. And I think the technical advisory committee is really to make sure we also science-based, fact-based, that we really bring in the best knowledge from all these know-how institutions around the world that works with it. And that policy and science needs to go together into action. And that's why we have the network. That's where we link to FAO, link to a lot of organizations who do this in the world. So I think the governance structure is very apt for what we're trying to do. Link policy, science, and action.
Yes, it seems like it. I mean, a very happy merriment, I would say, between policy, science, and action. I think something often we're missing. We often have one part of the puzzle, but not all three. So wonderful to hear that. Micah, now as WASAG sets its sights on ramping up implementation, what kinds of practical support should members be expecting, and what outcomes on the ground do you hope to see?
Yeah. Let me get one step back to the substance, no? Because governance and how we do it, the question is, what are we trying to solve? And I think we need to realize that while farmers are water stewards, they're sometimes also the people who create water problems. And
Mm.
that's why this dialogue is also so important, no? The government of the Netherlands actually convened the Global Commission on the Economics of Water. And why do we have water scarcity? We actually found out, the Commission found out, three things. One is because we actually use too much water.
Mhm.
Very often too much groundwater in India and northeast China and other parts of the world. And that's very often farmers who pump up that water. The second thing is changing land use. Because land use is changing, our rivers are changing, our hydrological cycle is changing, we've pushed the water cycle out of balance. And the third one is climate change. People feel climate change through water. For instance, farmers feel it, smallholder farmers, because the rains don't come and their harvest fails. So I think when you think about WASAG, you really need the agricultural community having better technologies to grow drought resistant seeds, to have different farming techniques to save this green water is important. But we also need a hydrologist and a water specialist
Mm.
to see how the water cycle works and how water is more than an input to farming. It's actually a natural resource we need to protect. And I think that's what WASAG is about. And on your question of what can countries, what can governments, what can stakeholders expect, I think it's really thinking about, okay, if we need to come together between the water community and the agriculture community for real life, local, regional basin solutions for this. How do we do this together? And we draw from the partnership to come up with tailored solution with the best science, but also with practical solutions. Again, it's about policies, it's about science, but we're really action oriented. All of
Mm.
this we do for action on the ground so that farmers change their practices, so that irrigation managers manage their systems better, so that the Minister of Water knows what to do, the Minister of Finance knows what to do, and really help with tailored help countries to address this really big problem to feed the world and especially people in water scarce areas.
Brilliant. I mean, it sounds to me again building on this idea of bringing together the different constellations of policy, practice, and action, but also making sure that we're building on knowledge that's already there within the partnership, bringing things together, but also localizing, tailoring as needed. Jean, perhaps you can tell us a little bit more about some of the other work that WASAG does, such as the knowledge products that you're producing. And I think that's also a really great way of building on what Micah was just talking about.
That is very true. The exciting thing about WASAG is the commitment of the partners. When we established these working groups, we really deliberately wanted them not to be driven by FAO, but rather by partners. So they became effectively community of practices where they convene, and COVID-19 did help because the advent of Zoom facilitated interaction. They convene to discuss different topics. And one of the outputs of their discussions are often knowledge products. For example, on sustainable agriculture water use or water use efficiency, the group is led by IMI and they've produced a policy brief. The group that is led by IFAD, the World Bank, and Climate Kick on financing mechanism have developed a framework where they share how we can create a sustainable ecosystem, financing ecosystem, which is a win-win for all the role players, the farmers, the financiers, and all the government and others. The Working Group on Drought Preparedness, which is led by UNCCD, has produced during the pandemic a guideline, a practical guideline to cope with droughts during pandemics. The Italian chapter of WASAG is producing a guideline on pressurized irrigation, which was actually of which the need was born from the first forum in Capo Verde, having seen what challenges Capo Verde goes through, and they've actually trained Capo Verdeans twice
Wow.
on adopting these guidelines and so forth. This is one kind of output. The second kind of output that we do then is to respond to the needs of those countries. Having developed these knowledge products, we go in the field and discuss with countries to ensure that they can adopt these technologies. So one of the other knowledge products that have been produced, it's a farmer's guidelines to cope with saline agriculture, which is so dominant in many parts of the world, small island developing states, coastal countries, and inland countries such as Uzbekistan. So we have trained colleagues and government staff in Uzbekistan, in Capo Verde. We have trained, right now I mentioned it, colleagues in Zimbabwe, not in Zimbabwe, but in Malawi, on indigenous drought resilient crops. And that's a very exciting initiative that is emerging. We had a session yesterday about it. And while we're here, we identified opportunities for synergies on these indigenous drought resilient crops that are now called opportunity crops. We focus currently on cowpeas and sorghum, just as two of them, but there is a myriad of such crops that can be promoted. And yesterday, one participant from Peru actually cried because he said this initiative was so important because he thought that some potatoes varieties were lost and they weren't in the fields in the village, and they found that the villagers were actually had a system for making sure that they can preserve these crops. Now we are adding science to that to ensure that it does happen. The other work that we do, and I'll stop there, is advocacy. With our colleagues from the Netherlands, we participate in all the COPs. And we promote systematically silent agriculture because it's so misunderstood. So we work with the Dutch, we work with ICBA, International Center for Biosilent Agriculture. We work with the Asian Development Bank, and we've produced different policy briefs, and we are busy working towards the establishment of an international year of silent agriculture. There are many other topics that are coming because we're going to establish task forces, and hopefully I can mention it later before we close.
Sure. I mean, so yeah, it seems like there's quite a variety of different topics coming forward, clearly from your membership, but also so wonderful to hear about how the sharing of this knowledge is driving forward the, being able to restore crops that might have otherwise been lost, or bringing technologies forward to ensure that agriculture can be continued on in areas that we thought might not be possible anymore after the effects of climate change. I'd now like to turn to each of you and ask what's your key message for our global community to take water for climate action and agriculture from words into action? How do we move forward from here? Micah.
Let's bring farmers together and water managers together. You have a farmer here, Jean, and a water manager. So we're here together because you have different views on this. Let's get out of our bubbles. Let's bring policymakers together, scientists together, because we need to act now, because the climate is changing now.
We need to act now. I think that's very clear. And also this idea that we need to be maybe reaching outside of our current bubbles, reaching across the aisle, reaching to different users and different ways of doing things. Thank you so much for that. Jean, what are your thoughts? How do we move from words into action?
First, I invite all of us to the third WASAG International Forum, which will take place in Punta Cana in Capo Verde in May 2026. We have reached the agreement with the government, and our office in the Dominican Republic will give us guidance as we announce the next steps. And it's not a talk show, it's really to ensure that we translate the theories, the knowledge into practice, and that this global movement translates water scarcity in agriculture into a golden opportunity for food security, for environmental sustainability, and for wealth creation. Thank you.
Thank you so much for that, Jean. I think so. Very clear call. We should all be there at the third WASAG International Forum in Punta Cana. And also this idea that we need to continue to build this knowledge and translate it into action. And I really want to come back to some of the earlier points that you were sharing as well, in terms of there are so many opportunities for developing knowledge through these different partnerships that we're all working with, but can we bring them together? Can we be talking more to each other and ensuring that we're bringing together the farmers and the science and the water managers, as you say? Micah and Shah, it's been an absolute pleasure to be here with you today. Thank you so much for sharing more about the incredible work that WASAG is doing and reminding us, of course, of the importance of keeping water scarcity for agriculture on the agenda. I think we need to seriously have this more at the top of our minds. And we really look forward to hearing more from you in the months to come. Thanks again also to our audience here in Stockholm and those of you joining us online. Thank you and goodbye.
Thank you very
Thank
much.
you. That was
Thank you.
brilliant. Very nice.